Hi, my name is Myron Mansfield. I'm with the Central Texas Amateur Radio Club and the Temple Amateur Radio Club, along with the Copper's Cove Radio Club. And what we're going to be talking today about is NanoVNAs. That's vector network analyzers that are used by people in the ham radio world to check their antennas to see if they're set up properly so that when they key up their radio, the antenna works and it does not burn out the radio. Because if you're too far off on the ohms or the SWR or your impedance ratings, those things will interfere with the radio operating. Now normally we have three different types of vector network analyzers here, and the one that we'll be doing most of the testing on and using, my fingers don't work too well, is this one. Okay, now they make them in different sizes. This has a 4-inch screen like these two right here, and then you have a 2.5-inch screen right here. Now they all do this pretty much the same thing. And why I have the computer here is, instead of trying to read the screen, which a lot of us when we get older our eyes go bad, and some of us when we're younger it's harder to see. And when you're doing a class or something, it's easier to show it on a larger screen. So I can use the computer to actually operate the vector network analyzer. And part of that is through a program called the NanoVNAsaver program. So I'll just pull it up on the computer. Now this is a free program, so usually these analyzers have a screen on it which will give you all of the information, and the screen, as you can see here, is very small and the print is extremely small. Now this is what's called a Smith chart on here, and it's a little harder to see, and you have to scroll through the different screens to see like 4 or 5 different screens. Well, on the computer you can show all 4 of them at the same time, or show 2 or 3, whatever is the area that you're really concerned about or looking for. So basically we use just a simple USB-C cable to connect up the analyzer to the computer, and you can use just about any computer for doing this. They have programs for both Apple and Windows machines.
It's on the bottom.
There we go. That's a good sign. I heard it beep. Okay. And one of the first things that you have to do with these analyzers is make sure that it's connected. Check your port number. And for a lot of us, you have to basically, over here in this corner, you'll see the little Windows diagram, and you click on there, or you can click on the little mirror and just type in DEV. for Device Manager. Pull up your Device Manager and you'll scroll down to your ports on Port and COM. And it will tell you which port it's on. In this case, the oddball one is port or COM 11. So we'll be telling the device, we're going to tell it to rescan and see if it comes up. It automatically comes up with port 11 as the H4. And H4 is what this is actually called. So we'll tell it to connect to the device. And it connected. Now on here the screen has now gone blank, but the Smith chart that you were seeing on the screen is right here. And the SWR reading is up in the top. Now there are several other screens that you can go to, but we're mainly concerned when we're doing antenna work with those two items. And the SWR reading will give you that particular information, where the Smith chart gives you your ohms as to whether you're within the parameters that you want to be. One of the first things that you have to do on this portion is calibration. So the simplest way is on the screen at the bottom. It shows Calibration Assistant. Now, since this is going out to other people, one of the things that I do for these calibration caps is I take and mark them as to which is your open, which is your load, and which is a short. So on the top I just put an O for open, and there's no button, wire, or anything else in this one. So that's what's called an open. The load actually has a 50 ohm load in it, and it has a pin on the inside. And your short is just shorted to the outside. So it would be like if you were doing an ohm test, just putting the two pins together on your cables. So we have to go through and do that. So we're going to hit Calibration Assistant, and it runs us through the setup. Now this helps you go through what you want to do as to whether it's 2-port calibration or a single port calibration. For the testing that we're doing, we're only going to do a 1-port calibration because it's very quick and efficient. And this is the same thing you've probably done 20 times. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're going to set it up and we want to put the short directly on channel 0. This is your top one, and we say OK, and it tests that, and then it tells us to go to the next one. Now we're putting the open on there, and you just click OK, and it does the work for you of testing it. And you disconnect that one, and put your load on here. So this is a one-port calibration. Now, if that's all you're going to do, and you want to, basically you're satisfied with that, you just press the apply. If you want to do two-port calibration for testing other things, you can go through and you test both ports, connect it together, etc. But we aren't going to go through that. So we're going to apply this for a one-point calibration, because that's all that we actually need to do. Okay. And basically, it's calibrated. Okay. Now, for testing the antennas, you actually, the same location that you place the which one of these do I want to use? Okay. Get rid of this. For the antenna, you're going to connect the antenna to the NanoVNA using the same wire and hold it in the approximate position that you would for use. So in this case, we've got a B and C connector here. And we have to use a little adapter. Between the B and C connector and the analyzer. These. Okay, now the antenna at the present moment has the elements folded over for transport, so that it makes it a little safer to hold the antenna, especially in confined spaces. And we'll try not to poke anybody's eye out. Now on these antennas, when you build them, some people like to take and put silicone or electrical tape at the ends of these elements. That way it makes them a little bit safer, so that you don't have a very sharp edge here at the very end. Now normally in use, you would hold this antenna And as an example, if you're pointing it at a satellite, say if it's coming from the west, you would point it low to the ground, and as you follow the satellite, which only takes about 15 minutes to go from one side of the earth to the other. And you'll point the antenna and you'll turn it according to the orientation that receives best. Okay, so you're actually holding the antenna. So this would be the normal way that you would use the antenna. So that's how you want to test it, is actually holding it. Now if your antenna is normally on a pole or on the side of a camper, then you would connect it up to the location that's closest to the radio. Now normally when we're using something like this, whether it's for a fox hunt or actually doing satellite work, we hold the antenna in our hand and the radio would be attached directly to it. Now for receiving, as an example, with satellite work, you can use a simple Bofang radio that costs less than $50 to receive the signal, and then you would transmit using another antenna or a dual antenna on where this would be VHF, this one would be set up on UHF, and you use this one to transmit while you're listening on this one. And normally when you're doing this type of work, it's best to have a small recorder because you can't remember everything perfectly. So it's easier to record the conversation because you're only talking about 15 minutes duration. So it goes very quickly. Okay, now this is a little better antenna that you're transmitting with, but they're also only low power. You're not looking at transmitting at 100 watts, you're only looking at transmitting from 5 to 10 watts maximum. Normally 5-watt handheld radio will do it without any problem to reach a satellite. Alright, we've got this hooked up, and the next portion that we have to do is tell it what our parameters are. So we've got to tell it what the center frequency, our start frequency, and our stop frequency. So for just doing this test, we're going to put in 143.1234 megahertz. I can't remember whether it's 3 zeros or 4 zeros. If you don't put the zeros in there though, it won't work. It will give you a fit. To 148.1234.
That's only 3.
Oops, I can't count. Okay, 4. Okay, and that is your span of radio frequency that you're going to be testing this with. Now I'm going to ask Alex to hold this, if you would stand up. Okay, and that's just fine. Okay, and normally we would be outside for doing this. Okay, and we'll tell it to, we'll click on sweep. Okay, now on the upper chart it shows your SWR reading. Okay, now our frequency range for this it's down to about 1.2, and you can actually click over here, and that would be marker number 1, and it's showing that you have your frequency at 145.100. Your SWR is at 1.174. Okay, so that's extremely acceptable. Now, bottom of the range, your next marker is 144 right here, which is the range of the licensed usable frequency. Okay, and this is the bottom of the frequency, and your SWR is 1.3. That's perfectly acceptable. And when we click over here at the top side of the frequency, 148, we're at 1.7. So that's way below 2. So it's perfectly acceptable where it's at. Doesn't need trimming or adjusting or anything else. It's usable, just like that.
Yep.
Okay?